Coming up in this video, mediumship development training tips. We're going to do a little Q&A or AMA. Ask me anything.
Oh,
did you know that?
No, I did not.
Yeah, AMA is Ask Me Anything.
I was thinking American Medical Association.
No.
And if you're just getting to know us, I'm Heather.
And I'm David.
From Zen Rose Garden. So 3 questions from our Zen heads. These questions in different videos in different ways, but we always know that there's a new angle. There's always a new angle to talk about. So the first question was, how do mediums receive messages from the spirit world?
In order to connect, you kind of have to meet halfway in what we call the sweet spot or the zone. And have a conversation, right?
Conversation.
The work is sustaining the connection long enough to get evidences or relevant details and pass those on to the living.
And that's a real general answer to the question. Like I said, we've got a lot of different videos on this, but that's kind of a general. The second question was...
Messages from spirit seem really unclear. Why can't they communicate clearly? Why can't they just tell me what the heck they want?
Right. Okay. So I'm thinking I can barely understand a drunk Irishman. So
I don't know who you're talking about.
So don't kick your ass. So this is the point, is that when the messages aren't clear, remember that you're in a really like question number 1, you're meeting in this space that's not normal.
In-between, right?
So, like I said, people from different countries that have really thick accents, you can barely understand, or sometimes.
Different parts of the states even.
Right.
So just like humans that you can't really understand, there are different levels of consciousness and skills from spirit as well. So spirits have different levels of skills and consciousness and sometimes accents.
And sometimes awareness. And it's not like they're speaking to you. It's different. Right. It could sound like a Peanuts cartoon, right?
Peanuts
when
gallery.
An adult talks, they're like,
yeah.
So sometimes it's not, that might not be your fault. It might be that something, there's different types of conversation going on. So while it's awesome when evidences are super clear, sometimes it's really hard to hear what is going on. Like someone who has a hard time talking and it sounds like they're underwater.
It happens to me all the time, or maybe that's just during happy hour.
I think that's just what he's hearing. So
no, that's kind of what I sound like. Well, not happy hour, not happy hour. If we go out later.
I feel like that sometimes, like when I'm trying to tell David something, I feel like that's how I sound to him. Like, I think
I'm not going to admit it, but maybe sometimes, hypothetically.
Sometimes, I remember yesterday when I told you that.
Allegedly.
That, and he'll go, no, what did you say? That's our version of yes, dear. So it's like they either said, I am near, or can I have a beer? So sometimes this is what you get.
I get a beer? Okay. No problem there.
You don't have to
I'm not going to say no.
You don't have to
twist. As long as it's a wheat.
You don't have to twist an Irishman's arm. So I think...
No, just twist the cap.
So I think there's a couple of things you can do to improve your communication. So let's kind of give you an idea of how you can improve this.
So your gatekeeper guide that we talked about in the last video is going to help you to stabilize the connection, but it's not an exact science.
So let's say the gatekeeper guide we talked about in this morning's video is his job or her job is to help you stabilize that connection. Like, let me improve the line. The gatekeeper is going to use like the operator, like the nerdy operator, the Overwatch that's like trying to help you connect and like improve your connection. Just picture the nerdy guy in the ops team. But
okay,
they're only gonna, you know what I'm saying?
I get it.
Like, let me see, or the sound man trying to keep the sound man in the studio, trying to like get rid of the static,
about making more clear,
clearing it up. But the gatekeeper can only get as clear as your ability is and the other person's ability. So the way to improve this, if you bump into a problem during a reading or doing your work, is to kind of note where it was a little bit iffy and then work on that sense. So let's see.
Because what's going to happen is you're going to recognize whether it's on your end or whether it's on the spirit end as you get better at clearing your line.
So let's say that it's the spirit that has a hard time communicating through a certain sense and they're trying to communicate through clairaudience. Then I would say in your sitting work, in your practice work on your clairaudience so you can get clearer and better and more skilled at clairaudience.
Or work on all of your skills, the different senses, so that you can open more of the different lines for that communication to come through.
What I'm saying is whatever the glitch is in that communication,
Improve that glitch.
Improve that glitch in your practice work. So that then when there's another communicator that comes in that's having a harder time, it will be a more improved communication the next time. That way your gatekeeper's job is easier. The spirit isn't going to improve their communication either way. It is what it is. But your ability to understand it will be better, and your gatekeeper will be able to use that energy and improve the whole communication. Is that
yes?
Nothing was funny.
Good. Basically, learning different skills as you notice an issue or as you notice an area for improvement is also what we call the Zen of mediumship development. So you're working on the thing in the moment, or the thing that comes to the surface because of a challenge that you may have had.
I think my point with all of this is when you have a glitch in communication and it seems like it's really hard to understand, don't panic in the moment. Do your best, especially if you're in the middle of a reading or work. Just do your best. But the thing is not to panic, because when you panic and have fear, it can close it down really tight. And then your gatekeeper's got to work extra hard to keep it open.
Right. Instead of noting it and then working on it later.
Hit you with the question number 3 we got in our inbox.
And this one is fun. This one is, why do I get wrong messages? This is really super embarrassing when I tell this person something and it doesn't mean anything. Okay, this is very, very common. Okay, especially as you're starting out and you haven't necessarily built your confidence level yet. So here's a little insider tip as far as that goes.
So the message may not be wrong. Okay. In the wrong sense of the word, because remember question number 2, how there's all this stuff going on. So, but the conveying of the message might be misaligned.
And we like to say misaligned instead of wrong, because you are not wrong in the way that you deliver a message. You may have a particular level of skill that can always be improved, but you're not wrong in your delivery.
Okay, so spirit often communicates in symbols, and different sorts of abstract things. Sometimes it's very direct. Sometimes it's a little bit different. This is why in mediumship training, you're learning the different ways that symbols come through and the types of symbols. And mediums can't always interpret symbols correctly. Right.
And what we're talking about as far as symbols in your encyclopedia and your dictionary, these are shortcuts that you learn through experience and over time, which is why practice and building a solid foundation are so important to your work. We like to use sitting work, which is basically meditation with a purpose for mediumship, developing your encyclopedia, developing your dictionary, an integral part of mediumship training. Because without that, you don't understand how to decipher these symbols or these messages that are coming through.
I mean, you're learning another language. Like I said,
basically at least 5.
Sometimes it's hard enough to understand someone that's talking to you with a very thick accent, much less from the other side. So you're learning accents, dialects, languages. So it's easy enough to misinterpret living people when they're talking.
Misinterpret them?
Misinterpret living people when they're talking to you. And for spirit communication, you have to learn the language and then all the dialects. See what I'm saying? It's like
which can change from spirit to spirit depending on the spirit's skill level, maybe where they came from, maybe what time period they were in.
So once you kind of understand, it kind of become an expert in languages, okay? Because you've met people, I think, you've seen people that are experts in languages. So they get to a certain point where they understand structure of language, flow of language, and then they can kind of learn languages very quickly or be able to understand foreign languages that they might not necessarily be super fluent in.
Because they have a root of the foundation.
Right. So like Germanic languages, Romance languages, those different sections of languages, it's the kind of the same thing when you're learning mediumship languages, spirit languages.
So this can also be because the information may not yet be relevant for the person or the person, or it's information for another person that might be a part of their family or in their field, maybe a friend, whatever it happens to be. So it may not be relevant in the moment for the people there. It might be a message to be delivered later for other people.
And all of those I have had happen in a reading.
Yep.
So,
and the feeling bad, feeling like you're somehow broken because the message doesn't come across, it could also be because the individual that you're doing a reading for is much more closed than they appear to be.
well, I've had that happen, interestingly enough, when I was reading for someone and I was seeing, and they came in for a very specific reason. Like they wanted to find a lost object, which is not my specialty.
Right.
You know what I mean? And spirits don't care as much about your lost objects. They're like there to communicate, want to tell you they love you, they want to give you a message. So
the human people are more worried about the lost objects.
Right. So I was seeing a picture of a gentleman in my mind with a flannel shirt that had blue checkers, and he had a certain thing on. And I said, here's the man that I see, and he's got all this love for you. And I was describing him, and she pulled out the picture out of her wallet, and it was boom, boom, boom. I had described her husband that had passed, that knew where the lost object was. But I didn't get a sense of where the lost object was. I kind of saw like an area in her house where it might be. But it was more about, he was, wanted to say he loved her. And she wasn't very happy with, and even though like, oh my gosh, your loved one just showed up.
And she's like, no, but I want to know where the thing is.
And I'm like, okay.
It was a very interesting reading, but by that point we had kind of gotten to a stage in our own confidence where it wasn't so much on us.
I wasn't worried about it.
To make sure that she had an amazing experience and got exactly the information that she needed. Our job was to deliver the message as clearly as we could.
So I think also, because for me, I'm pretty clear about that's not my specialty. There are some people whose specialty is finding lost objects. For me, I'm going to see what the spirit wants to tell me, and that's what the person wants to deliver. So it's when you come in when you have a client
who comes in with a rigid idea,
with a demand about, I want it to be this way. Their loved one on the other side might be like, sorry, but here's what I'm coming all this way to see you. So here's what you get. So that's, I think, something you cannot beat yourself up about as a medium, because you have to understand the scope of what's happening.
Right. Okay. So Mage, it is good to see you. Mage says, hi there. I've been falling down a YouTube wormhole and ended up here from Birmingham, UK.
Yes.
Okay, so I want you guys to get your questions ready. Any questions related to mediumship, drop your questions in the comments, and we'll go for probably about 10 minutes, I'd say.
I'll answer off the top of my head a crazy question that we get once in a while you guys are thinking about anything. And that is, okay, there are different groups of people that teach mediumship in different ways in this kind of modern era. There's the people that are very superstitious about it. And then I find that the spiritists, which is different from spiritualists.
Right.
And I think people get the groups confused. One is a little bit more superstitious, and the spiritualist mediums are more about technique and training, but they're also also more based in sort of a religious base. And then you've got they got us. So my training is in spiritualist mediumship, but we've also
evolved in different areas and kind of let go of a lot of the religious elements of it.
But it just happens that we get a question once in a while that can you die? Can you be harmed? Can something really bad happen to you? One question I got in a workshop once that we were facilitating was, can a spirit drag me across the room and hurt me? And I think you've got to lose a lot of yourself for anything like that to happen. And I think so steeped in fear and paranoia and neuroses that's what's hurting you more than any kind of spirit phenomenon. I think that you've lost control of your own personal energy so much at that point that you're hurting yourself more than a spirit can. So
yeah, when we're talking about massive poltergeist activity like that, where you've got a spirit that is taking over or whatever, usually that comes from an intense break in your psyche that is doing way more harm than any spirit is doing. Okay, so your emotional state, your mental state has much more power in this physical realm than a spirit does.
Well, absolutely. And I think once you come into mediumship with the right intent
Right.
to help and to heal, you're automatically sort of protected by
Yes.
the heavens, if you want to call it that, the heavens, the higher powers.
If you want
And
to go at it from a science perspective, if you're in high vibration, you can't have low vibration messing with you.
Right, because if you're coming into it with this beautiful intent,
Mhm.
you have got automatically things you can't see circling around you, protecting you,
Mhm.
taking care of you, helping you amplify your intent, and you know what I mean.
Right.
So I think the thing that gets in our own way and makes us feel unsafe is working out our emotional,
The fear itself,
the
I
fear
think.
itself. So I think it's the fear itself. Our own emotions get in our own way.
And the best way to counter fears like that are to educate yourself, to get a solid education that is going to alleviate naturally most of the fears that you have anyway.
And I find a lot of the fears that we have come from pop culture,
Yeah.
and
Or
superstition,
movies, scary movies, things like that.
superstition,
Right.
hardcore religious beliefs that
Right.
are based in iffy,
Right.
or origins.
Origins, right. All
Right.
right. Denise says, I get a lot of ringing in my right ear when I feel spirit around me. Does that have anything to do with mediumship?
That we call that a doorbell.
Yeah.
And doorbells can evolve over time. You could have
Right.
more than one type of doorbell. It can also be a signal that clear audience is happening or getting
Mhm.
ready to happen.
Right.
A doorbell would be something that your gatekeeper guide might be showing you that when this happens,
Mhm.
there's spirit communication.
So a doorbell in a nutshell is basically a way for a spirit or your guides or your gatekeeper to let you know that there's a spirit that wants to communicate. Usually it's going to be coming from your gatekeeper or your guides. Okay. And especially if you have that construct set up
Right.
to kind of frame mentally to give you a framework to work with. And then Tanya says, OMG, had to totally stop watching scary movies, had to really work on that fear, and then settled into my mediumship without fear. So much better. Funny story about scary movies for myself personally and for Heather is that the more that we worked on our own personal fears, the less movies scared us. Even the scariest scary movie that you could possibly think of, I can watch any movie now, and the only thing that will ever get me is when they cheat and do a jump scare.
Jump scares don't even scare me anymore. I've raised teenagers. Come on. So, no, for real, I used to be terrified of scary movies and horror movies. And now it's so weird because I love them, because I understand that world. I understand the psychology behind it. And it's actually more interesting to me as an exploration into human nature and the ability of the human soul to overcome